They sent the infertile bride to shame her, but she became the only woman the cowboy ever loved. New Mexico, 1885. A dry wind rolled through the small town of Eastridge, lifting red dust from the roads and scraping it across the cracked wooden storefronts. In this place, a woman's worth was measured in sons, nothing more, nothing less. And for Mabel Thorne, that worth had already been decided. She stood at the edge of her family's porch, her boots lined up like she was going to a funeral. Maybe she was. She was 20, with eyes that used to be full of questions. Now they were tired, faded. Her hair was tied back neat, as her mother had ordered, and her bag lay by the steps, light, as if she no longer owned anything worth carrying. "You'll ride to the Rowe Ranch before sundown," her mother said, straightening the collar of her dress like she was dressing a doll to be sold. Mabel didn't answer. 3 months ago, everything had collapsed. One accident, one hard fall from a spooked horse, and her body had failed her. A premature labor, a stillborn child, and a doctor's verdict like a branding iron. She may never carry again. Her betrothed, Daniel, had left that same night. No letter, no goodbye, just whispers afterward from every mouth in town. "She's barren." A dead field. No man wants a woman who can't give him sons. The town was small, the cruelty was smaller. Her father no longer looked her in the eyes. Her brothers pretended she'd moved out, but it was her mother who had made the final decision. "He doesn't want children," her mother said, matter of fact. "Just someone to cook and clean. You'll suit him fine." Mabel kept her voice low. "You're sending me to a stranger." Her mother's jaw tightened. "We're giving you a chance. You want to stay here, listening to what people call you? Let them think we're cursed? He's a good man, keeps to himself. No one else will have you now." Mabel blinked. "So, this is about your shame." Her mother's voice cracked like a whip. "You think I enjoy this? You think I want to send my daughter away? But I'd rather have a daughter far off than one bringing disgrace to this doorstep." Then came the words that would echo through Mabel's bones for the rest of her life. "That man doesn't need you to bear children. He just needs a shadow in the kitchen. Go, Mabel, let us hold our heads up again." She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She simply picked up her bag and stepped down from the porch. "If the world says I'm worthless," she thought, "then I'll find my worth myself." The stagecoach came at noon. The driver didn't ask questions. No one did. They never did when a woman left town like this, with no wedding, no ring, just silence. Mabel rode alone, the desert stretching out like a judgment all around her. The sun cast long shadows over the dry hills. Her hands stayed folded in her lap, unmoving. Her mind replayed the last words her mother said, not because she believed them, but because they burned. When the coach slowed before the Rowe Ranch, she looked out at a vast, dust-bitten land. Fences ran for miles. Cattle shifted in the fields. A barn loomed in the distance. And standing at the edge of the porch was a man. Garrett Rowe. Tall, lean, broad in the shoulders, he wore a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow, save for a mouth drawn in a firm, unsmiling line. He didn't approach the coach, didn't extend a hand, just nodded once, curtly. Mabel stepped down without help. He opened the door to the house, still without a word, and she followed. No greeting, no welcome, just the sound of the wind outside and the click of the door closing behind them. The silence in that house was heavier than stone, and in it, Mabel knew, this was not a new beginning. It was exile. But she walked in anyway. The Rowe Ranch stretched out across the New Mexico dust like a sleeping giant, worn but proud. The fences groaned with the wind, the barns stood like forgotten tombs, and the main house sat atop a small rise, wooden, gray, and still. It was large, but empty, like a home that had stopped breathing. Garrett led Mabel through the kitchen without a word, then vanished behind a door that closed with finality. No instructions, no tour, no conversation. For the first 2 days, Mabel barely saw him. The chores were many and foreign. She'd grown up in a house with hired help, a garden, even a school marm. But here, life was survival. And survival had no patience. The stove refused to light at first, the firewood too damp. She burned her hand on the cast iron and bit her lip rather than cry out. The red clay dirt clung to clothes like a curse, and the washboard scraped her knuckles raw. The well out back, some kind of crank contraption, refused to give water no matter how hard she pumped. When she asked one of the ranch hands about it, he only gave her a look that said, "We do not answer to you." She heard the whispers. "That's the one who can't have kids. Brought here to warm a kitchen, not a bed. Poor Mr. Rowe, marrying a dead tree." The children from the neighbor's farm, 3 wild-haired siblings who often came by to play near the stables, stared at Mabel with wide eyes. They never spoke to her, and once, when she knelt to hand a toy to the youngest, he recoiled. "Ma says not to touch her," the middle child muttered. Mabel stood slowly, nodding once. She said nothing, not because she agreed, but because what could she say? At night, the house was quiet, save for the creaks of old wood and wind slipping through the shutters. Garrett never came to the kitchen for supper. He took his meals alone, either on the porch or not at all. Once, she heard him coughing late into the night, a hard, broken sound. But she did not knock. Then came the water pump. On the 3rd evening, after an hour of struggling with the iron handle and an empty pail, Mabel gave up. Her palms were blistered, her patience thinner than smoke. The next morning, as she stepped outside, she noticed a folded piece of paper wedged under the pump handle. On it, written in blocky, firm script, "Turn the valve left, then pump." No signature. But it didn't need one. She turned the valve. Water came gushing out, cold and clean. That night, without a word, Mabel baked a small round of cornbread. She wrapped it in a napkin and placed it on the porch near the rocking chair where Garrett sometimes Saturday. She said nothing. The next morning, the cornbread was gone. But something else had changed too. The 3rd step on the porch, the one with a splintered nail that caught her hem every day, had been fixed, replaced with a new board. The old creak was gone. No one mentioned it, not Garrett, not the ranch hands. But Mabel paused at the step, touched the smooth wood, and felt something stir in her chest. It wasn't conversation, it wasn't warmth, but it was something. A silent rhythm, a whisper between 2 people who did not know how to speak yet. She straightened her shoulders and went back to work. She would not cry, she would not beg, but she would survive. And in that survival, she would leave proof, quiet, steady, and unshakable, that she belonged. It began with a broken chalkboard and 5 borrowed stools. The old horse barn behind the Rowe ranch had long been abandoned, its roof patched with tin, the floor uneven and strewn with hay. But to Mabel, it was shelter, and perhaps something more. Every morning after chores, she cleared a space by the southern window where light spilled in like gold. She found scraps of slate and carved makeshift letters into the dust. Word spread faster than wildfire. By the end of the week, 5 children showed up, barefoot, sunburned, uncertain. They watched her cautiously, still influenced by the whispers of their parents. But Mabel greeted them with warmth, not pity. She handed out pieces of charcoal, showed them the alphabet, and smiled when the littlest one asked, "Are you a real teacher?" "No," she replied gently, brushing hay from a wooden stool. "But I can help you read." That day they called her Miss Mabel. The name didn't carry reverence, not yet, but it held no scorn, and that alone made her eyes sting. She began planting a small patch of herbs near the chicken coop, lavender, mint, ginger root, and wild chamomile. Her mother had once taught her the use of healing plants, and though the memory ached, her hands remembered. One evening, just as the sun dipped low, a young girl from a neighboring ranch was carried into the yard, burning with fever. The parents were frantic, no doctor for miles. Mabel took charge. She crushed peppermint for the chest, sliced ginger into warm broth, and brewed chamomile tea with honey. She stayed up through the night, wiping the child's brow, whispering lullabies between prayers. By dawn, the fever broke. Garrett watched from the doorway. He said nothing, but his eyes, tired, shadowed, lingered on Mabel longer than they ever had. There was something softer there, something that resembled respect. And then came the mountain lion. It was a still afternoon, too quiet, the kind that carried danger on its back. Mabel had taken the children out to gather wild berries by the edge of the field. She was kneeling beside a bush when the youngest boy, Thomas, screamed. She looked up and froze. A mountain lion, thin, hungry, its golden eyes locked on the child. There was no time, no gun, no help, only instinct. Mabel grabbed a pitchfork lying against the fence and sprinted across the dry grass, heart pounding. She threw herself between the boy and the beast, the pitchfork held high, though her hands trembled. "Get behind me!" she shouted. The lion snarled, inching closer. In the next heartbeat, a rifle cracked. The lion collapsed. Garrett stood several paces behind her, rifle still raised, his face pale with fury and fear. "You could have been killed," he growled, voice gravel and ash. Mabel turned to look at him. Her chest heaved, arms trembling from the adrenaline. "I did what anyone would have done." "No," he said, lowering the gun. "Not anyone." He walked toward her, slowly, then stopped just a foot away. For the first time his voice cracked, quiet but raw. "You're crazy, Mabel Thorne, but I have never seen anyone braver." She didn't know what to say. She only nodded, too breathless for words. Their eyes met, truly met, for the first time. No longer as strangers bound by obligation, but as two scarred souls who might have just saved each other. It was not a declaration. Not yet. But something had shifted in the wind. The wind carried the scent of smoke and sage that evening as twilight bled across the horizon. The fields lay quiet, dust glowing gold in the last light, and the old porch creaked beneath two pairs of boots, one pair worn from work, the other still finding its place. Garrett sat down next to her, not across the table, not passing by, but beside her, as if he meant to share the silence. Mabel kept her hands folded on her lap, fingers curled tightly together, eyes trained on the stars as they appeared one by one, shy flickering lights peeking through the deepening dusk. It was quiet, not empty, just heavy with everything unsaid. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Then Garrett cleared his throat, a rough sound breaking the hush like gravel underfoot. "She was 24, he said. Her name was Ellen." He let the name linger in the air, like it still belonged to someone in the room. Soft laugh, smelled like cedar and bread. Mabel turned to look at him but didn't speak. She didn't need to. He wasn't telling her for comfort. He was remembering. "She and our son Josiah were coming back from town," he continued. "Just a regular day. Picked up flour, thread, candy sticks for the boy." His voice thickened. "The wagon never made it home. They found it overturned near Dry Creek, hoofprints, bullet shells, no witnesses." Mabel's throat tightened, her breath hitched, but she stayed quiet. "I buried 2 caskets with nothing inside," Garrett said, eyes not on her but on some far-off place. "And something in me never stood up again. Nuff." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Like both of them had stepped inside a church, neither knew was there. Then softly, Mabel whispered, "I was engaged once." Garrett turned his head, his gaze gentle but intent. "His name was Carter. We were promised since I was 16. Everyone said he was a good man." She gave a dry, humorless laugh. "I fell off a horse during a storm, lost the baby before I even knew I was carrying it. The doctor said the damage might be permanent." She paused, her hands clenched now. "He called off the wedding, told everyone I was broken. A dry field, they said. No use in her now." Her voice cracked. "I haven't been looked at like a woman since." Garrett's jaw tensed, but he didn't speak right away. Another silence fell, but this one felt different, like the soil had shifted beneath them. Garrett didn't offer pity. He didn't say things would be all right. He just leaned back in his chair, his silhouette outlined by the soft blue hush of evening. "You ever notice," he murmured, "how the stars don't shout to be seen?" Mabel blinked. "They just burn, quiet, still, but no one forgets they're there." That night they said nothing else, but something settled between them, a quiet knowing, a beginning. The next morning, as Mabel came into the kitchen, she stopped short. There, on the wooden table, lay a book, worn leather, edges scuffed, the kind that had passed through many hands, a medical text. Her fingers brushed its surface slowly, unsure. Then she saw the scrap of paper sticking out between the pages. She pulled it gently, revealing a section that had been carefully marked. One line was underlined in ink. "Not every woman bears children of blood, but none are denied the right to be a mother." She stared at the words. Her hands began to tremble. And then, quietly, tears spilled down her cheeks. Not because she was weak, but because, for the first time in her life, someone had looked past her brokenness and seen something worth cherishing. She folded the page back with care, pressed the book to her chest, and whispered to the quiet room, "I will prove them all wrong." And this time, the fire in her eyes wasn't sorrow. It was purpose. Fall arrived with its brass colors and dry winds. In the heart of town, canvas banners flapped between buildings, and barrels of cider lined the wooden sidewalks. The annual harvest festival was in full swing. Music, pies, laughter, all laced with judgment for those who didn't belong. Mabel walked beside Garrett, her dress plain but clean, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. Children from nearby farms tugged at her skirts and whispered, "Miss Mabel, will you really let us read our poem?" She smiled, though her palms were damp. "Only if you remember every word." She was there for the children, not the gossip, not the stares. But the stares came anyway. "She's the one that can't bear children. I heard she lost a baby on a horse and never got right again. Poor Garrett, married a dry field." Mabel stiffened. The words cut deeper when they came with sweet smiles and pies. Garrett heard it too. He dropped her hand, fists clenching at his sides. His jaw worked tight as he turned toward the group of men lounging near the saloon, their snickering obvious. He took a step forward. "Garrett," Mabel whispered. He didn't stop. "Garrett," she said again, firmer this time, placing her hand on his arm. "Don't, not like this." 5. He turned, eyes flaring, ready to speak, then stopped. The steadiness in her gaze wasn't defiance, it was strength. "They want a show," she said quietly. "Let's give them a different one." And with that, she walked to the center of the market square. Garrett followed slowly, watching as she clapped her hands. "Children," she called, "it's time." From behind barrels and stalls, a group of dust-covered kids emerged, shy, barefoot, clutching worn paper scripts and flowers, made from corn husks. Mabel knelt, smoothing a boy's collar and brushing a smudge from a girl's cheek. Then she stepped aside. The children began. "We are the ones you left behind, in fields of sweat, in sun that blinds, but words we learn, and hope we grow, from roots of women you don't know." Their voices trembled at first, then grew stronger. "She taught us not to fear the dark, to write our names, to leave a mark. Though barren they say her womb may be, her heart gave life to kids like me." By the final line, the crowd had fallen silent, even the gossips. Garrett stood at the edge of the square, his Stetson low on his brow. He watched Mabel, her chin high, her eyes glowing like flame. She didn't cower, didn't flee. She stood tall, her students, her shield, her voice now the wind reshaping this dusty town. One of the men from the saloon muttered something foul. Garrett's hand moved to his hip, brushing the grip of his revolver. But he didn't draw. He clenched the leather, fingers digging in, not to fight, but to keep from breaking. Because for the first time in years, he felt something swell in his chest. Pride, awe, love, and the sting of tears he didn't let fall. Later, when the festival died down and families returned to their wagons, a few women approached Mabel. "My boy ain't spoken more than a word till he met you," one said. Another added, "You teach letters, but you teach something else too. My girl looks at you like a hero." They didn't speak of wombs, or worth, or what she could or couldn't give a man. They saw her. As the days passed, the whispers dulled, the stares softened. Mabel became Miss Mabel to more than just the children. She became something rare in the West. A woman not defined by what she could birth, but by what she could build. The sun dipped low behind the mesas, washing the land in gold. The wind, carrying the scent of dry sage and dust, whispered through the tall prairie grass. Garrett rode in silence, his hat pulled low, reins loose in one hand. Mabel followed close behind on a bay mare, her fingers clenched on the saddle horn. He had not told her where they were going, only said, "Ride with me a while." They rode past the wheat fields, past the boundary of the ranch, where the land grew wild, and the path gave way to stone and silence. At the edge of a shallow bluff, Garrett dismounted and tied his horse to a dead tree, gnarled and scorched by lightning. Mabel did the same, her eyes narrowing at the sight before her. A small wooden cross stood crooked in the ground. No name, no date. Just a scrap of worn ribbon tied around it, faded pink. Garrett stood beside it, hands in his coat pockets, eyes not meeting hers. "This is where I come, when the silence at home gets too loud." Mabel said nothing, but her breath caught. He looked at the cross. "My wife and son, we never found them. The wagon burned, nothing left but ashes. The preacher gave me a plot in town, but it felt wrong to bury nothing." He knelt, brushing dirt from the base of the cross. "So, I made this, a place to say what I couldn't, in town." Mabel stepped closer, slowly, her boots crunching gravel. "I used to talk to them," Garrett continued, voice low. "Tell them how the horses were doing, how the rain hadn't come, how I was still here." He turned to face her, eyes lined with time and loss. "But I stopped coming for a while, after you arrived." She blinked. "Why?" He swallowed. "Because I didn't feel alone anymore." The air seemed to still. "I made a promise the day I buried that cross," he said. "No one else would get near my heart. Not again." Mabel's mouth parted, but no words came. Garrett reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver ring. It was simple, tarnished by age, etched with a worn engraving of vines. "This belonged to my mother," he said. "She gave it to my wife before we married." He didn't kneel, didn't offer ceremony. He simply held the ring out to Mabel. "I'm not asking you to be something you're not. I'm not asking for children, or promises. I'm telling you—" He took a breath. "I choose you. Not because I'm lonely, not because I need someone to cook or clean or warm the bed. I choose you, Mabel, for who you are, for what you've brought back to this place." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't cry. Instead, she stepped forward, took the ring in her palm, and closed her fingers around it gently. Then, without a word, she reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined. Calloused met calloused, two weathered lives folded into one quiet touch. They stood like that as the sun sank behind the bluff, casting a long shadow from the wooden cross over the dry earth. Mabel squeezed his hand. "You didn't have to say all that," she whispered. Garrett smiled faintly. "I wanted to." She looked up at him, eyes bright. "Then I'll say something too." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm not afraid anymore." "Of what?" "Of being unwanted, of being broken." He brushed her hair back gently. "You were never broken. The world just didn't know how to carry someone like you." They didn't kiss, didn't rush back to the house or to a bed or to the safety of routine. They just stood there, side by side, two souls once shattered, now finding wholeness in each other's silence. And as the last light faded and the first star pricked the sky, the ring sat warm in Mabel's hand. Not a symbol of possession, but of being seen, of being chosen. The night was still when the first blaze rose, quiet as breath before a scream. The sky above Rowe Ranch glowed orange before anyone smelled the smoke. A dry wind carried it fast, curling into the rafters, licking the barn like a hungry beast. Garrett awoke to the crackle and roar, his revolver already in hand. Fire! He burst from the cabin barefoot, the front of the barn already ablaze. The roof glowed, black smoke pouring skyward in thick, choking columns. Shadows ran in chaos, men shouting, horses screaming. And Mabel. Mabel, he yelled, turning in place. Where the hell is Mabel? She ran to the stables, someone shouted. The kids were still in there. Without pause, Garrett sprinted toward the flames. Heat slapped his face, searing the air in his lungs. Sparks flew like fireflies. A beam cracked and fell, nearly striking him. Mabel! He roared again, voice raw. Inside the barn, the smoke was a wall. Through it, he saw her silhouette, barefoot, hair loose, dress blackened with soot, holding the hands of two terrified children as she pushed them toward the back exit. Her eyes locked with his for a single heartbeat. Then the loft collapsed. No. Garrett lunged forward, but the flames blocked him. Two ranch hands dragged the children out the back, but Mabel had disappeared beneath a wave of fire and falling timber. He fought against them, tried to break past, screaming like a madman. Let me go! Garrett, no! You'll die in there! But it was too late. The flames had already taken her. He fell to his knees in the dirt, fists pounding the ground, voice breaking into a guttural sob. The sound was primal, raw pain tearing out from a place he thought long dead. No, God, please, please. He crumpled, arms wrapped around his chest like trying to hold in his own shattered ribs. Around him, the fire devoured all it touched. And then, like a whisper against the roar, he heard it. Help! Faint. So faint he thought he imagined it. Garrett's head snapped up. Help! He ran, through smoke, through falling ash, through the back of the barn where the fire hadn't reached yet. And there, under a collapsed beam, her arm limp across the straw, was Mabel. Face streaked with soot, breathing shallow, dress scorched but body miraculously whole. He dropped beside her, lifting her into his arms with a sob. I've got you, Mabel. Her eyelids fluttered. He carried her out into the cool night, cradling her like something sacred. The sky above still glowed red, but all he saw was her. Kneeling in the grass, trembling, he whispered against her ear. You stupid, brave woman, you ran into the fire. He pressed his forehead to hers. You could have died. Her lashes moved. He cupped her face, voice breaking. I don't care if we never have a son. I don't care if no blood of mine ever carries my name. You hear me? His words fell in a hush. I don't need a legacy. I just need you breathing. White. Her eyes opened. Wet. Alive. And she whispered, hoarse as wind over gravel. You said, you just need me. Garrett nodded, tears falling. Just you. Always just you. And for the first time, Mabel cried not from pain, but from being chosen, exactly as she was. And in the background, the barn burned to its bones, but in Garrett's arms, something was reborn. Spring came to New Mexico not with fanfare, but with soft rain and blooming silence. The blackened remains of the old barn had been cleared, a new one stood in its place, simpler, humbler, but built by hand, with sweat and purpose. Garrett worked beside the ranch hands again, calluses forming where grief had once hardened, and Mabel was always there, hammer in hand, sleeves rolled, face lit by something deeper than sunlight. They had survived the fire. But more than that, they had begun again. It was Garrett who found the child. A boy, no more than 4, huddled near the border fence with dust in his mouth and a ragged toy horse clutched in his fingers. No name, no voice, only wide, frightened eyes. Garrett did not hesitate. He picked him up, carried him home, and placed him in Mabel's arms. He's ours, he said simply. Mabel said nothing, just held the child tight, tears soaking his dirt-caked hair. They named him Levi. At first the boy did not speak, but slowly, over weeks, he followed Mabel around the garden. He helped water the herbs, mimicked her as she read aloud to the chickens, and eventually fell asleep each night with his head in her lap. When he called her Mama one morning, Garrett had to walk outside just to breathe. The town changed too. Those who once whispered barren and wasted now nodded with respect. Mabel had faced down beasts, fire, and a future no woman was raised to want, and chose to stay, to build. She became Miss Mabel to every mother who needed healing herbs, every child needing letters, every man who realized quiet strength was stronger than shouting. Even the mayor's wife began sending her jam. One morning, with spring still damp in the grass, Garrett stood on the porch watching Mabel chase Levi through the puddles. Her dress was soaked, her laughter free. Her hands cradled her stomach once or twice, but not in hope, just in habit. There was no pregnancy, no plan. But there was joy. And then she looked up, her eyes finding him like they always did. She ran to him, barefoot and wild, and he wrapped his arms around her. Raindrops clung to her lashes. "You're soaked," he murmured. "So are you," she smiled, resting her head on his chest. He tilted her face up, the rain soft between them. "You are the only woman I've ever loved," he said. "You didn't give me blood, but you gave me a home." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. That afternoon, they planted a cottonwood tree just outside the porch. Garrett dug the hole. Mabel placed the sapling. Levi brought over a pail of water, spilling half on his boots. The three of them stood there, hands muddy, hearts full. Years from now, that tree would rise tall, its white blooms whispering against the wind, petals like snowfall in summer, and people would come from miles away to rest beneath it, not because of its shade, but because of what it stood for, that no storm, no fire, no cruel word could define a woman's worth, that love did not always arrive through bloodlines, and that a family, stitched together by courage, could bloom even in the dust, just as Mabel Thorne had. If this story of love beyond blood, of quiet strength and healing in the dust, moved your heart, don't let it end here. Tap that hype button, and let us know in the comments. Have you ever seen a love bloom where no one believed it could? For more powerful, slow-burning romances set under the wide-open sky, stories where broken souls find shelter in each other, subscribe to Wild West Love Stories and hit the bell icon, because out here, the wind carries more than dust. It carries the kind of love that changes everything.